conservatives find a lot of difficulty with George Orwell. One, that he was an atheist, and that even at the time of his death said that he was a devout socialist. Could you help us understand how, first of all, a devout socialist could be so anti-communist?
Basically, Orwell was concerned with what he viewed as the corruption of socialism in the way that it had happened on both the right and the left. That is, it was obvious to any leftist in the British intelligentsia of the 1940s that National Socialism was a complete contradiction from what the ideals of socialism that Orwell supported represented. There were very few socialists on the left who were fooled even in the very beginning by Hitler. Orwell's innovative stance was to observe that the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR, Uncle Joe Stalin, who was the ally of Britain and the US during World War II, was no better than Hitler. In fact, Orwell said in the preface to the Ukrainian edition of Animal Farm that he had written this little fable in order to destroy the myth that Russia is a socialist country. And he felt that that myth had taken on such power that it was necessary to fight it, not through ordinary prose fiction, let alone through a series of essays. All that had been done by many other authors, and yet the current of opinion that supported the equation of Stalinism and socialism continued. No, the myth had to be fought with an equally powerful anti-myth, a fable, a didactic fantasy that would be so memorable and so vivid and so gripping that it would overcome and destroy the myth. And eventually that is what happened with this deceptively simple short fable, Animal Farm. What Animal Farm did was to expose the fact that the party, the Communist Party, the Comintern, that is international communism, as well as the CPSU, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, were a bunch of pigs. That even the best of them, the dissident pig, the heroic pig that was being defended so much by the intellectual left in the US and Britain, namely Leon Trotsky, who we know in the fable as Snowball, was little better than the evil Napoleon, alias Joseph Stalin. No, the pigs were the pigs. And the pigs had developed a hierarchy so that Manor Farm, the farm that had existed under the Tsar, the old feudal farm, was not bettered, but dramatically worsened by the revolution led by the pigs that led to Animal Farm. And Animal Farm was not a farm for the animals. It was a farm for the pigs. Especially the ruling pigs, the pigs of the nomenklatura, the elite pigs. Above all, Napoleon and Squealer and the others, and Snowball, so long as he was still on the farm. So that this first point then is that Orwell could oppose communism, and of course the only living form of communism during his lifetime, until the very end, was the Soviet Union, so that he would oppose Stalinism. The People's Republic of China was born in February 1949, only 11 months before he died. So for all intents and purposes, the only communism that Orwell ever knew was Stalinism. He could remain what he considered to be a democratic socialist, a socialist defender of what he saw as the ideals of socialism, justice and liberty, even though he would oppose communism, ergo Stalinism. Now the question is, if Orwell were alive today, if he had come to see that it wasn't just this first version of Stalinism that ran around in pig's clothing as communism, ergo socialism. If it wasn't just this corrupted form of socialism, if all of the successor states that called themselves socialist and communist had turned out to develop forms of economic and political collectivism that also led to pig tyranny, could he possibly have remained a socialist? Or might he have seen that, no, by this point in time, a half century and more later, history has taught us that when power is concentrated into hands that are centralized in a collectivist fashion, economically, politically, and otherwise, when pigs rule, eventually what will inevitably, inexorably occur is oppression and tyranny. Might he have concluded that? Might he have turned against socialism itself? The question is fair. One reason that he wrote such a supportive review of Friedrich Hayek's The Road to Serfdom was that he sensed that socialism might inevitably lead to the servile state, which Hilaire Belloc and others had warned against, that it might eventually mean totalitarianism. Arguably, in 1950, that lesson was still too early to be drawn. Other socialisms were on the horizon. Orwell himself still hoped that his response to socialism, such as when he fought for the loyalists against Franco and the fascists in Spain, might indeed be the socialism that could be incarnated. That is, a socialism that would mean justice and liberty for all. He was a socialist because of experience. He was not a socialist because of some kind of abstract intellectual formula. That is, he was a socialist. He was not a progressive. He was a socialist in the sense of rebelling against the injustices and the lack of freedom that he saw under state capitalism. But if he had seen that these new successor forms of socialism in the late 20th century and early 21st century had simply led to other forms of oligarchical collectivism, might he not have repudiated socialism itself? The second question has to do with atheism. Orwell thought of himself as an agnostic.